There's a lot of skeptics out there. I also used to be a skeptic, right? I had to really experience these tools myself and experience the huge benefits to then believe it. And so I also wanted to validate that people would be open to even trying things like breathing practices in the workplace.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis. Today, we're going to be talking with an entrepreneur who has brought her passion for meditation into the workplace and created a business around it. Really great example of somebody who figures out something they care about and then figures out how to build a business around it for all you aspiring entrepreneurs. Her name is Zee Clarke, and she's a breathwork and resilience expert and the author of the groundbreaking book, Black People Breathe. Now trained in India, she's a Harvard MBA that went from leading teams at Fortune 500 companies to teaching powerful tools to improve our mental health and well-being in the workplace. Her Black at Work program, that is Black @ Work program, focuses on helping people of color manage the chronic stress and professional development challenges at companies like Google, Visa, AMC Networks, and is supporting the well-being of their teams with these programs. Now, this episode focuses on Zee's journey as a woman of color, integrating meditation into her life. But of course, the lessons are for everybody in the world. So you're going to love this episode. And as you know, I start every episode by asking the same question. So I asked Zee this: tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
I learned that I have the ability to heal myself and to make myself feel better. And that was surprising.
Okay, unpack that now, because that's a good one. Everybody wants that. We want that.
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of my life looking to others to help me to feel better, right? So if I'm upset, if I'm stressed out, if I'm sad, like whatever, if I have any sort of problem, I call a friend, I hire a therapist, call a family member or what have you. And I was always depending on other people to help me feel better. And on my journey, through learning a lot of holistic healing practices, which I'll share a bit later, I learned that I actually have the power within me to heal and to feel better. And whether that's through mindfulness practices, breathwork practices, or even just self-discipline around self-care or paying attention to what I need in this moment, that is the power. And I think often, I don't know if we were brought up to just go to others, right? Maybe it just made like coddling of children or what have you. But the wisdom that I found is that there are all these tools available and we have that inner wisdom. Our intuition. I learned to trust my intuition. If I ask myself what I need, most likely if I get quiet, I will be able to know the answer. It arises. And nobody else knows better than me. So it's trusting myself.
Yeah, it's really, as I'm listening to you, the word that came to my head is agency, because I think like one of the themes of this show, and I think like everybody who's listening gets this if you listen regularly, which I hope you do, is like we're all just trying to figure out how to, choose our own path. And what happens is like the world is, it's intense, right? Like a lot of things going on. And then we forget like, oh, actually, I can fix this for myself. Not always. Like, granted, if you have a brain tumor, like mindfulness isn't going to get you all the way there. It will be helpful.
Yeah.
But you're going to need other things. But for many, many daily problems, like when you wake up in a crappy mood, like there are ways to deal with that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But what I want to start with is you're one of my favorite types of guests, because you're the person who, you were in the business world. So it's not like you came at it from nowhere, but you're what I like to call a little bit of an unexpected entrepreneur, which is somebody who, is working, doing, a traditional career path, and then through a series of events finds a pathway
Yes.
to starting something that you are building for yourself. So I want you to talk about that path because, you're the Harvard MBA, now in this world of mindfulness and breath work and workshops and all sort of stuff. Talk about that journey.
Yes. Well, I spent most of my life following the traditional path, looking at what others defined as success, right? So hence, I went to Harvard for undergrad. I went to Harvard Business School.
Fancy.
So fancy. At HBS, often we talk about the herd mentality, right? And that often is, well, it depends on what year you graduated, actually. So maybe I'll date myself and say consulting and investment banking, though. Is that still trendy these days? I don't know.
I think, tale as old as time, for sure.
So I did consulting after business school, and I've always sought out, big respectable brands to show that, I don't know, external validation, right? And what I found is, as I was sprinting on this corporate treadmill, that burnout is real. And especially as a Black woman in corporate America, I often found myself as the only Black person on the team, in the organization. And then people would question whether I actually deserved to be there. So whether I was just a diversity hire, for example, that actually, first day of work, somebody said to me at a new job, "Hey, are you the new diversity hire?" And so when people make comments like that, the pressure is on to prove to them, no, a diversity hire, I deserve to be here. Look at my resume, look at my qualifications. But that meant that I always felt like I had to work twice as hard as everyone else. And then in addition to that, as the only Black person, often there are extra responsibilities placed upon me. So particularly in diversity, equity, and inclusion, like when I was in consulting, since I'm the only Black person, guess who has to go to all the recruiting events, for example, so that they can show that they have diversity. So basically, I was working nights, I was working weekends, just burning the candle at both ends. And that started to affect my mental health in terms of just the stress, the anxiety, and then stress affects your physical health. So I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and ultimately my doctor said something's got to change with your stress levels, or this is not sustainable for you to be on this planet. And so with that said, I actually took that seriously because I didn't grow up in a household that believed in mental health. My parents were like, mental what? No, go to work, go to school. Like, we don't have time for that. And so I didn't really think that was an issue. I never really prioritized it. I was like, just push through, be strong. And that didn't do well for my health. So I took the doctor seriously. I quit my job. I left the United States, actually, and I went to India, where I studied yoga, meditation, breath work, which changed my life. I became a sound healer with Tibetan singing bowls and learned all of these tools. And I had never felt better in my entire life. And that was how I decided, well, I need to share this. Like, all of these people are suffering, and these are such simple, easy to use tools. And so that's how I transitioned into, okay, I'm going to teach these tools to others in corporate America that were like me, that were swamped, buried in work, go, 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 go. And then suddenly, I'm having friends that have cancer now, right? Like, I have friends that have all sorts of health issues that, one can, I'll just say, I think that stress is a factor in that. Of course, there's genetics and other things, but can be helped or prevented.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who ended up in a heart monitor after the financial crisis, I feel you on all that. And that was the beginning of my whole kind of, I don't know, change in mindset. Because I was also like, just push through. Like, let me, I would have a cold. Like, when I'd be like, last night of the cold, just drink a lot of alcohol. It'll kill the remainder. I mean, what the heck? Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
I mean, a little whiskey with lemon, hot toddy.
No, I was like, no, like vodka. Anyway, yeah, not good. But I think, I just want to highlight a point you made, which is the story about the diversity hire, because we recently had a guest on, Bruce Feiler, who's been on a bunch of times. He wrote a book called The Search, and he talks about that people have, like, we think of you have one job in your career, but people have multiple jobs. Like, they could have a side hustle, they could have a dream job. And one of the jobs people have is carrying around that kind of, like, one of your jobs is dealing with that crap, For you, that was a job.
Yes.
And so for those of us,
Yes.
we all have that, and many people have that in different ways. Like, you who knows, like you're really, really tall and people make fun of you. I mean, that's we all have things that people pick on us for, or treat us
Yeah.
differently for, and
Mm.
discriminate against us for. But what I would say is,
Mm.
for that, when I heard that story, I just want to highlight, like, for everybody listening, like, just think about, don't be that person. Like, listen to that story and think about how it could feel to be in the shoes of somebody who is looked at that way every day, who has worked just as hard of you or harder, and has the credentials, and yet is discounted and treated that way. It is a huge, huge weight on that person. And, you can decide to not contribute to that. And so it's really important. Now, I want to talk about, before we get into the business you're building, just definitions a little bit, because as I was thinking about your work, like mindfulness versus breath work versus meditation, like I think a lot of
Uh-huh.
times we think they're all the same thing. What's the difference? Like, break it down.
Okay. Well, let's talk about mindfulness, because in my mind, mindfulness is the umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
and mindfulness means paying attention on purpose to what is happening in the present moment without judgment and with curiosity. And so paying attention. And that means it could be lots of different things. That's why I said mindfulness is the umbrella.
Yeah.
Breath work, breath work is one type of mindfulness because you're paying attention on purpose to the breath. Meditation is another type of mindfulness practice, and there's so many different types of meditation out there, right? But in meditation, like for example, there's a body scan. You're paying attention to different parts of your body. You could meditate by looking at a candle light. You could meditate by visualizing something. So there are different types of meditation, but all of them involve paying attention in the moment. Mm-hmm.
FOMO. FOMO. Yeah. And so, we've talked about, everybody's listening. They're like, yes, Patrick, we know you're a believer. It's not that and by the way, like I do 10 minutes a day. It's not like I'm living in like a hermit in a cave, but I see the clear results of that kind of practice and other practices. But, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit, because we're going to get your tips. But Zee, so you come back from India. It sounds pretty awesome. And you decide to make this a business. Now, that is, that's easier said than done, because any entrepreneur knows, number one, even though these are like practices that are really, really old, like there's a lot of people just, they're skeptical. And then also selling that into corporate environments and scaling it and making it sustainable, it's not easy. Talk about, but then we have your Harvard MBA there, to rely on. So how did you figure out how to make it into a business?
Well, just like any business, you really need to understand what's the problem that you're solving and make sure that that problem exists, that the people that have the problem know that they have the problem, right? Because educating people that they have a problem is not helpful. And so for me, the first flagship program that I launched is called Black at Work, and so I focused on the Black community first because that's closest to my experience, and microaggressions and racism are real in the workplace. You can look at statistics, right? There are lots of studies and research, but also just anecdotally talking to people that I know. And so starting this business, I first started by doing research, particularly interviews, talking to people that I thought might have the problems that I was trying to solve, to validate that, yes, they had the problem, yes, that they knew that they had the problem, and yes, that they really, really wanted some help in solving that problem, and that nothing else was really out there focused on the Black community to help with these issues. And so then there's the question of, well, are people going to be open to these tools that I'm offering? Because it's not, people aren't using them in this way. And there's a lot of skeptics out there. I also used to be a skeptic, right? I had to experience these tools myself and experience the huge benefits to then believe it. And so I also wanted to validate that people would be open to even trying things like breathing practices in the workplace, right? And so I started by just doing research. I also, I used to work at an innovation and design firm. Design thinking is in my blood. So I just can't help but take that approach. So I took a design thinking approach to solving this problem and to bringing it to market.
I want to kind of go into that a little bit because you mentioned microaggressions, and I think like that word has become so like, I don't want to say political, but maybe political. It's one of those words that people throw around and roll their eyes, right? And like, but when I think about it, and tell me if you agree, it's like the story you told earlier about just like people dismissing you as like, that's kind of more than a microaggression, but it's like the idea is that, every day you get treated a little differently, and it chips away at your sense of self and your sense of, how you fit into the world. And you start to realize like, hey, I'm not treated the same here. Now, how does meditation and mindfulness and breath work help? Like, how do you make the case to Google, hey, this is a thing that will, change the culture at your firm, or at least for the folks that are affected?
Yeah. So first, it's like, well, what is the impact of microaggressions on people,
Sure.
right? And so there's actually Harvard School of Public Health study that shows that discrimination and racism actually is the direct cause of the higher rates of high blood pressure in African Americans. Also shows that it causes anxiety, depression, and over time causes chronic stress. And chronic stress causes weakened immune system, anxiety, depression, obesity, accelerated aging, so many things. And when you make the case to a company like Google or any large company, well, do you want this population to feel this way? Because if they do, guess how it's going to affect your bottom line? You're going to get a reduction in focus and productivity. You're going to get, people are looking at employee satisfaction, employee engagement numbers, which by the way, are going down. And for Black populations always tend to be the lowest because of how we're treated. And so if your people don't feel well, they will not perform well. And so, the question is, what do you care about, right? And I know that clearly people care about profits, but what they need to understand is that the well-being of their employees, and as I said, I started with Black employees, and now with my new Breathwork at Work program, it's for the entire workforce. But if your people don't feel well, ultimately that's going to be a problem for your bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true what you say, which is we can all agree, or we can talk about the sort of the why and the bigger picture. But if you want businesses to pay for stuff, you really, most of the time, have to give them a profit sort of imperative, right? I mean, these are not charities. And even though there are people who may understand this, it's like to justify that line item in the budget, they have to connect the investment with an outcome. And so that's what you've done. Now, talk about what have you learned along the way that has changed your model? Like, what have been the things that, because, we all start out, we make those first phone calls, we do those first pilots, and we have a vision for what we're going to build. And then 3 years later, it's like a whole different thing. So how has this evolved as you built it?
Yeah. Well, I will first say that in the research phase, what I found was really important, especially as I bring practices like mindfulness and breathwork, which have been done for thousands of years in the East, is that I needed to make this as secular as possible. So, we've all heard the word woo woo, right?
Yeah.
And maybe my HBS classmates might think that I've gone woo woo, but I will tell you this. These practices, especially breathwork practices, there is now research that shows that they are effective in lowering your blood pressure, in reducing your stress levels, reducing anxiety. And so, one of the early things I found in bringing such practices into a corporate environment is having to adjust the language as well as bring in some of the science and some of the research to justify why this works. works to get people to be willing to try it, right? And so that was one thing of just messaging, positioning, and making sure that it wasn't too woo-woo for a corporate environment. The other thing I would say is, as somebody that dedicated, a couple years to just really diving deep into these practices, I'll say that you get more out of them the more you do them, the longer you do them. So I wanted to come with these like long, big workshops, and clearly everybody is busy, right? And so one of the other things that I learned, just getting feedback and also by doing it, is that shorter is better, and also giving people tools that they can then take, like little snack bite-sized things that they can do to fit into a busy day, so that it's not like your whole day is, this is a self-care day. No, I'm recommending to people, take 5 minutes, put it on your calendar and do this breathing practice, or ways that you can fit it in a busy life. So those are a couple just kind of adjustments and things that I made along the way.
FOMO. Yeah, that's super smart. I mean, it's so true. Like, woo-woo is a term that I use kind of in a very kind of cheeky way, I guess, because I do think, I think it's one of these things when you talk to people and you hear these terms. Some people are like, "Oh, am I going to have crystals?" Like, Spencer from The Hills and his crystals. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, like. And maybe you want to do that. Like, I'm not here to tell you not to have your Spencer crystals, but for the rest of us, like that's not my vibe, right? And so I'm not going to do that. I'm a little bit more practical than that. Funny enough, it's like when you make it about, like, if you were to say prayer, nobody would freak out about the religion, but with meditation, and it's interesting. I don't know. That's a whole other podcast episode. But on top of that, it's like, how do you make it sustainable, practical, integrated into a daily life? I have it on my calendar.
Yes.
I don't need it anymore, but I also have an app I check into, because like I'm competitive. And so I know that if I'm leveraging one of my other qualities to get this thing done. And because I know that like it is good for health, blood pressure, stress, all that stuff. So I see it as it's kind of like eating your broccoli in a sense, except way more pleasurable. I do like broccoli, but I like meditation more. I want to talk a little bit, because a lot of people listening, are saying, okay, cool, I get it. I wanted to do that. So I was at a conference talking to a group of people who were high finance people. And one of the guys, I asked a question like, what would you change about yourself? And he said, I'm very high stress, very type A. My family doesn't like it. And I said, oh, well, do you meditate? And he was like, oh, I'd love to. I can't do that though. And I said, how many people meditate? And like 2 of the 10 people, and the rest were like, oh, I can't do that. And I was like, I used to say that too. I was the guy who was like, never. And now I'm 5 years into this, and I'm like, and I look back and I was like, geez, like it was a mindset thing for me, and also some practices. But you do this for a living. You show people how to make this part of their routine. So give us some tips that we can integrate into our daily lives.
Yeah. So there are a few. Well, one, I want to, and actually, if you're open to it, I'd love to lead at least 1 or 2 breathing practices.
Oh,
but I will just say,
let's do it.
Okay, so we'll put breath work in a parking lot for now.
Oh man, you're the host of this show now, by the way. So you go ahead. I like this.
But just, some tips in terms of routines. Well, one, I mentioned breaks. It's very important to take breaks in the middle of your day. And I think that we are just not conditioned to do that with back-to-back meetings on your calendar with like barely enough time to go to the bathroom or eat, right? And so actually putting breaks on your calendar is so important. And even if it's just a 5 or 10-minute break, and here's the thing, what should you do during that break? Don't check email or open up your phone and start scrolling TikTok. Like, that's not helpful. Actually, 2 things I recommend to do during a 5-minute, and granted, you say you don't have 5 minutes, 2-minute break, okay, is breathing practices. And we'll do a couple, and I'll show you what you might be able to do. And there's a breathing practice based on how you're feeling. So they're different breathing. I'm angry, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm anxious, right? And so figuring out what you're feeling, and then doing that breathing practice. Another thing that's really easy to do in the middle of the day is stretching. So literally just, we all know how to stretch, all types of stretches, reach your arms up, lean from side to side, whatever, neck rolls, shoulder rolls. It doesn't take long, even 30 seconds. I recommend to people when meetings end early and they say, I'm going to give you a little time back. Now, usually people just go to their computer and they're like, okay, let me just write this email or I'm going to try to do. But what can you really do in 3 minutes, right? You know what you can do in those 3 minutes when you got time back? You can do a breathing practice, or you can stretch, or you can just stand up, walk around for a second and come back to, just the action of moving your body moves the blood flow. And that ultimately helps you to focus better, helps you to be more productive. So just in the middle of your day, making sure you have breaks. I would also say that every day I do a daily self check-in. Every day when I wake up in the morning, I say, good morning, Zee, how are you? And based on that, that can influence my day. If I'm like, I'm stoked today. This is a day. Great. Oh, I'm going to tackle all those big projects. But if I'm tired today, maybe I'm going to cancel some of the meetings that aren't so important. If I'm feeling vulnerable or sad because something happened in the world or something happened in my personal life, then maybe today's a day I call a friend or I call somebody that I love, my support system. Those are just a few of like the
Those are all
kind of
good
day to
though.
day.
Those are things that like I hear them and I'm like, man, I got to do more of that. So especially as a short king, you got to stretch because you're just a little bit taller. Just a little bit taller. All right, so let's do some breath exercise. This is good. If you're driving right now, by the way, just don't do it with us. Like, save this.
Yes. Well, maybe I'll start with when you're anxious. So, a lot of us have been very anxious about whatever it is. And what happens is your mind starts spiraling. What if this happens? What if that happens?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, whether it's about a big presentation at work, a deal closing, or maybe it's something in your personal life or something in the world, right?
Yeah.
And often when that happens, it's hard to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And
You
so, you're lying
catastrophize.
down.
100%. Oh, yeah. I
Exactly.
did that the other
And
night.
so
Oof. Okay, keep going.
Oh, no. So, the practice that I'd like to share, which you can do while lying down in bed, if that's happening to you, or you can do it in the middle of the day if it's happening to you, is 4-7-8 breathing. And the way it works is you inhale for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 7, and you exhale for a count of 8. And so, would you like to do it with me?
100%. It's one of my faves. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So I invite you to sit up straight, shoulders back and down. Again, for those driving, probably want to wait to do this afterwards. And we're going to breathe in and out through the nose. Okay. So we're going to inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And relax. Let the breath be natural and take a moment to notice how you feel. Now, the research shows that this practice, if you do it for 2 minutes, stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight or freeze nervous system, your stress response. That's that anxiety voice kicking in. And so this acts as the brakes to that gas pedal to slow you down, get you that calm that you need to be your best self, whether it's in the middle of the day, right? Because when you're anxious, then you start treating people not that great. You're not that focused. You're not going to do as good of a job as you'd like to. And so this can bring you back.
Love it. That was great. I that's a favorite, by the way. Post-workout, amazing. Oof.
Yes. Let's see. Another one is for frustration.
Oh.
So, we all get frustrated. Like people don't do what it is we want them to do, whether it's people that work for us, whether it's vendors, like also things don't work out the way you want to, and it gets frustrating. And again, that then brings up that sympathetic nervous system, and we're not our best selves. We might be curt with somebody. We might raise our voice, right? Like whatever it is, however everybody is different. But it's not helpful. And so straw breathing is very helpful for releasing frustration. The way straw breathing works is you're going to inhale through your nose, and then when you exhale, you purse your lips as if you had a straw and you blow out. And what this does is it makes the exhalation really
Ooh, I
long. And
love.
that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Would you like to
It's a
do this together?
recyclable straw, by the way, everybody, okay? Not
Ah,
of one-use plastic. Just so you know. All right, let's do this. This is good. I
yes.
love the slow exhale, which is what I do. That
Yes.
it just
Yes.
brings it all down. That's such a good one. Okay, let's do it.
Yes.
Oof.
Okay. So again, sitting up straight. And the reason I always say to sit up straight is so that you can get your full lung
The
capacity. And
diaphragm and
again,
all the things.
yes,
Mm.
exactly. So we're going to inhale through our nose, deep breath in, and then purse your lips, exhale out of straw. And maybe one more time, inhaling deeply, exhale, pursing your lips.
Love that.
And you know what I saw when you did it? Your shoulders
Oh
went
yeah.
down. So we don't realize that we're walking around with our shoulders up to our ears. It's a stress that we don't know because stress lies in the body, right?
Yeah.
I like to say the issues are in the tissues, right? And so, yeah, right? Something happens, you feel it in your stomach or your throat. And this
Mm.
constant level of stress for me and for a lot of us lives in our shoulders. So that straw breathing allows you to calm down, but then allows you to think straight and really think, it's the pause between stimulus and response.
Mm.
You get that email and you want to just get and be like, I can't believe you did blah, 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 right? But if you did straw breathing or any sort of breathing practice that slows you down, then you get a little clarity and you're like, okay, what is it that I want to achieve right now? What is the best way, best approach, best language to use to get the outcome that I would like?
Yeah, and you know what happens too, and you mentioned this earlier, like the more you do it, like I was that guy who would send back like the angry response to emails, but after
Mm.
the years of doing this stuff, like my ability to freak out and be like a total reactionary jerk has declined by like 98%. And so
And the world thanks
yeah,
you.
I'll just think about it. Like I got an email the other day. I was like about it's a long story, but I was like I want to write back something a little bit aggro. I waited like an hour. I wrote back something delightful, and I got the outcome that I was looking for. I was still straight up. I was like, listen, this happened last time. Let's not let that happen again. Let's do this. So it wasn't like I was a pushover, but I did it in a way
Yeah.
that elicited a much more productive response. FOMO. FOMO. Now, speaking of productive responses, Z, it is time for
Mm.
the lightning round. I got 4 questions for you.
Okay.
You ready to go?
All right. Yeah.
Okay. First one. What is a favorite quote?
Oh, a favorite quote. I mean, I don't know who said it, but it is today I choose me.
I like that.
And that's because we got to prioritize self care.
Yeah, I hear you.
Hmm.
That's very in line. Okay, number 2. Name a book or podcast that every FOMO Sapiens should read.
The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, that's a classic. It is a classic. Next, name one piece of advice you would give to your younger self.
Oh, gosh. It's not that serious. I mean, I'm going to expand on that one a little bit. I know it's a lightning round, but basically,
Yeah.
my younger self thought every single moment was the biggest thing, and it really, if you zoom out, it's not.
I mean, that is some true statement right there. It's like, especially when you have real problems, when things get really messy and really messy, you're like, boy, I really should have been just like not cared about that silly thing. Final one. What's your most important memory?
Oh. There's a woman who I dedicated my book, Black People Breathe, to, and her name is Dr. Harriet Jenkins, and she was kind of like a grandmother to me. And she used to host these events at her house where she would bring people together that had different, not just skill sets, but experiences. And she curated it with such with such intention that she knew that this person should meet this person because they have a secret passion for this topic or this, whatever it is, this area that maybe they're not allowing themselves to fully explore. So she would be this like magician in the background that would bring people together and not tell people about it in advance, right? You just show up to her house and suddenly you have all of these inspirational conversations. And so I'll say it's not just one memory, it's like the series of memories of these dinner parties when beautiful souls connect and inspire each other.
Convening is the ultimate move in the post-pandemic age, and she was ahead of her time.
Yeah.
All right, the book is called Black People Breathe. If you want to find out more about Zee's work, you can go to zeeclarke.com. That's Zee Clarke with an E on the end.com. You can also find Zee on Instagram and TikTok at Zee Clarke Breathes. Zee Clarke, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.